you could do it. All right, so looking at number 3, derivative tangent secant, but one step at a time, right? The Tootsie Roll Pop rule. You do the outside first, leave the inside alone, but then multiply by the derivative of the inside. But that's going to be a little bit tricky. Not tricky, it's just the product rule. So f and g. So f prime is 1, g prime is, Lucas, did you ask for this one? You prefer y prime or dy dx? I'll let you pick.
I do y prime.
Y prime. Probably most of you do just because it's easier to write. It's just be careful writing y prime that you know it's y prime, not y to the first. But y prime, nothing wrong with that. So let's see. Product rule is first times derivative of the second. So that would be xy prime plus the other way, second times the derivative of the first, so that'd just be y, equals 0. All right, the good news, I guess the good news anyway, is that the calculus part of this problem is over. Like right now, we are switching to algebra mode because we need to solve for y prime or dy dx. So this is not a safe stop because you don't have y prime by itself. Yeah, the steps are just algebra, but you can't stop there because it said find dy dx. And you know, you've seen those jokes maybe. If someone's like, hey, there it is, I found it. No, it means solve for it, get it by itself. So let's move the 1 over. I could distribute, but I don't really want to distribute because I'm trying to get y prime by itself. So instead of distributing it, let's divide it. And let's start peeling the layers off to get to y prime by itself. So xy prime plus y equals 1 over secant squared xy. But there's a much better way to write that, right? Tyler, how should we write that?
1 over cosine, or negative cosine.
Oh, eek to both of those. Secant and cosine are reciprocal friends.
Cosine.
So I don't even need a negative. I just need to flip it over, and so it's cosine squared of xy. And well, you wouldn't even have to do that, right? You could just leave it as 1 over secant and be fine, because that's trig stuff. I'm almost there. I'll subtract y and then divide by x. So cosine squared xy minus y, and then I'll divide by x. I don't think CalcChat would do anything different with that. Obviously, this isn't a CalcChat problem, but I think that's as simplified as you could make it. Yes, sir?
Whenever you go from the negative one and you're going to the other side, that's where the negative cosine comes from.
Wait a minute. Yes, you're right. You were right that it was negative because, yeah, this should be negative. Because when I move it over, it should have been negative. You were right. Thanks for not letting me get away with that. Let's do one more of those. Somebody else have a preference?
Number 7.
Number 7. Consider the curve defined by the equation y plus cosine y equals x plus 1. And we're only concerned with 0 to 2 pi. So that's kind of nice. We don't have to worry about going around, multiple times or going backwards or whatever. So when we get to our answers, we only have to worry about, kind of the first unit circle set of answers. Part A, find dy dx in terms of y. Okay, so that means I need to take the derivative of everything. Here's one way to write that. D dx out front means take the derivative of. So that's sort of explaining what I'm about to do. We did y prime on the last one, so I'm going to do dy dx on this one. Completely interchangeable. Use them however you see fit. I say that. They're interchangeable for us. In later calculus life, you can, when more than two variables are involved, you can take derivatives with respect to other things, and then you would have to show that it was dy dx as opposed to dy dz or dy d whatever. But for us, for now, y prime would be okay. Actually, the stuff we do today, it's probably better to do dy dx, so I'll switch to dy dx for this one. All right, cosine. Derivative of cosine is, what's the derivative of cosine? Negative sine. This is a bit of a chain rule, so leave the y alone. We took care of the cosine. Now we'll take care of the y. Dy dx equals 1. Okay, calculus is over. Now it's time for algebra. So I'm going to factor out the dy dx. 1 minus sine of y equals 1. So dy dx equals 1 over 1 minus sine of y. And I'm good with that answer. Maybe there's some crazy trig rules that you could finagle something in there, but let's just be good with that. That's part A. Part B, write an equation for each vertical tangent. Vertical tangent. Vertical tangent. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Vertical looks like that. Tangent means slope. So what's the slope of a vertical line? In some ways you're right to do that. Not because you don't know, because the slope of a vertical line is undefined. And the only way to get undefined is to divide by 0. So our slope would be undefined when this denominator equals 0. So that would be sine of y equals 1. So where does the sine equal 1? Right there. So that would be when y is pi over 2. Reread the question and make sure we answer what's given. Write an equation for each vertical tangent line. What's the equation of a vertical tangent line look like? X equals something. So I've got y equals, I need x equals. So let's go back to the original equation to figure out if y is pi over 2. What's x equal to? So pi over 2 plus cosine pi over 2 equals x plus 1. Pi over 2 plus, I already got my picture for pi over 2. The cosine there is 0. Then I'll move the 1 over. So the x value is pi over 2 minus 1. So that would be there's a vertical tangent line at x equals, or no, the vertical tangent line is x equals pi over 2 minus 1. And then lastly, find the second derivative. In terms of y, that's good news. That way I don't have to plug things back in, I think. So I'm looking back at dy dx. This looks like a quotient rule problem about to happen. So f prime would be 0. G prime, just looking at the bottom, would be minus cosine of y dy dx. it won't all fit on the screen here, but the second derivative is gf comes first. So gf prime, oh, that's kind of nice, because f prime is 0. So gf prime minus fg prime over g squared. Well, f prime is 0, so it doesn't matter what g is. Minus, the other way, f is 1. G prime is negative cosine of y dy dx over g squared, 1 minus sine of y squared. So that becomes positive in the top. Dy dx is, from earlier, 1 over 1 minus sine y. And so really there's a third, that 1 minus sine y is in the denominator. So this one wasn't too bad. Easy for me to say, I guess. Cosine y over 1 minus sine of y cubed. All right, again, more answers to those are posted in Schoology with work shown. So hopefully you can follow them along there.